Good evening and good morning. You are watching CCG China and the World Dialogue Series, The Future of Globalization, a Flatter and Deeper World, featuring internationally renowned journalist and writer Mr. Thomas Friedman. Pleased to welcome host of today's dialogue, CCG President Dr. Wang Huiyao.
Good evening and good morning, everyone. Welcome to CCG Multimedia Center. Also, thank you for being with us for this dialogue with Thomas Friedman, and also presented by Center for China and Globalization. So it's really a great honor for me to welcome Thomas Friedman, but also to welcome all of you to be here to watch us or listen to us tonight. As we all know that Tom is a renowned international journalist with the New York Times. So we're very honored and pleased to have him with us here tonight. And also he has written several books, 7 books actually, and all New York bestsellers, including From Beirut to Jerusalem, The Lexis and the Oliver Tree, Longitudes and the Attitudes, The World is Flat and Hot, Flat and Crowded, and most recently, Thank You for Being Late. I mean, actually, I remember in 2017, Tom actually come to CCG, actually did a great talk on his latest book, which is Draw the Large Crowds from China. I mean, of course, he's also a world-renowned reporter, and he's a weekly columnist for the New York Times, and the recipient of the 3 Pulitzer Prizes. So actually from technology to environment, from Middle East to China, US relations. Tom actually wrote many very influential and impactful columns that we've been keep reading from time to time. I know Tom is also a great friend of China, and I actually personally also a great friend of mine as well. I know Tom, of course, through his book, but of course we actually met first time when I was a visiting fellow at Brookings in 2010. You came to one of our discussion then, presentation. It was really impressive. I visited your office with Dr. Miao, and you had a very large office in the downtown DC. So it's really many times we have seen you in China. Your book about The World is Flat actually has been recommended by, I remember then, Party Secretary of Wang Yang in Chongqing, and is as one of the best sellers in China. But I also I'm quite impressed actually in 2012, on October 2012. You wrote a column called China Needs Its Own Dream, actually ahead of 80th Party Congress to propose that. So it's fascinating to see how you follow China closely. And also you know that we are now in a very turbulent time. We have a pandemic swept over the world. We have the globalization, de-globalization, and we have, of course, the biggest economy, U.S. and China now in the hot positions, and also we actually now trying to sort out what's next. So I remember last November actually you attended one of our webinar in Beijing at Center for China and Globalization Forum, which talk about things, but at that time is very limited. And I also saw you on the. I attended the China Development Forum. You had a 5-minute talk there also. So tonight we actually have quite a bit more time. We would like to have an in-depth discussion with you about your views and exchanges. So this section is a part of a CCG China and the World webinar series that we actually launched in 2020 in efforts to engage eminent scholars, experts, government advisors, advocates, scholars, business leaders to talk about China and the globalization, and also the trend, the development, and the challenges ahead. So perhaps, Tom, you would like to have a little opening up, say hi to our audience, and then we'll follow up into the question and discussions.
Well, Henry, thank you very much for having me. I have so many fond memories of visiting the your center in Beijing, giving book talks there, and hosting you in my office. We always have free and frank discussions from which I learn and benefit. And I'm looking forward to being with you today and engaging with your broader audience in China.
Thank you, Tom. And Tom, as you're famous, I think you're very, become icon actually of the globalization, actually a symbol of the globalization, because your famous book, "The World is Flat," is basically a very long time best-selling author in China, and also best-selling books in China, has actually influenced many people. But of course, in that book, you talked about the globalization. You divide it into three phases of course, the country on that, and then the company on that, and the individual. So from countries, of course, thousands of years, compete and making the world flat, and then the companies basically has great roles to play. And now, year 2000 with the internet revolution, we have this individual. But today we also see the globalization now gets more challenges now. We have a lot of de-globalization going on. We have a populism. We have all those things. So what's your take now on the globalization? Globalization 0.4 or globalization new version, or how are we going to take a look on this new trend that globalization lead us?
Well, it's a good place for us to start, Henry. Whenever I do webinars like this, often the first question people have is the world still flat? Mm-hmm. And I always start to laugh a little, because I say, wait a minute, I'm sitting in my office in Bethesda, Maryland. My friend Henry's sitting in his office in Beijing, and we're having a conversation as two individuals, as if we were sitting across the desk from each other. Is the world still flat? Are you crazy? It's like flatter than ever. Henry, always remember, when I wrote The World is Flat, 2004, basically, mm-hmm. When I wrote that book, Facebook didn't exist. Twitter was still a sound. The cloud was still in the sky.
Yes.
4G was like a parking place. LinkedIn was a prison. Applications were what you sent to college. Big data was a rap star. And Skype was a typo, a typographical error. All of those things, Henry, came after I wrote The World is Flat. So the world today actually is flatter than ever. We have never connected more different nodes than we have today. And we've never greased the connection, sped up the connection between those nodes more than we have today. But we've also done a third thing. We've actually removed a lot of the buffers that manage the flow between those nodes. So think of this, Henry, between December 2019 and March 2020, just as coronavirus was emerging, there were 3,200 direct flights from China to America. 3,200. There were 50 direct flights from Wuhan to America. Most Americans had never even heard of Wuhan. So think about what's going on in the Suez Canal today. There's a ship stuck in the Suez Canal. And there is some company in Europe, or maybe in China, or maybe a company in Europe waiting for its supply from China because of just-in-time inventory delivery, but when we take the buffers out, the system just gets faster and faster. And so the world isn't just flat now, Henry, it's fragile. It's fragile because when you connect so many nodes and then you speed up the connection between those nodes, but you take the buffers out, you get fragility, because now I can transmit instability from my node to your node faster than ever. So yes, globalization ever since when I wrote The World is Flat, Henry, many people wrote books. Oh, it's not flat. It's spiky, it's lumpy, it's curved, it's bumpy. All those books are wrong, okay? The world is flatter than ever.
Great, Tom. I think that's absolutely correct. I think the globalization is accelerating actually to some extent with the technology, with the all the speed that that we are involved in on that, and but also the movement of the capital, the movement of the goods, and the movement of the talent. All those things has been actually become the heavier and faster than before. And so what do you think about the future trend? Are we looking at some new development trend? Of course, we've seen the flow of all those things, but digital economy, right? I mean, is coming up, and also as you said, between there's probably 20,000 people across Pacific between China and the U.S. before the pandemic times. And so we have 400,000 students, Chinese students in the U.S., and used to have 3 million tourists. Probably before the year 20,000, China hasn't much tourists about, but then before the pandemic, China has about 150 million outbound tourists. So 10 million people go to Japan, and another 10 million go to Thailand, and 3 million went to U.S. So what are we seeing in the future then? Yeah.
So the book I'm working on now, Henry, if I gave it a name, and it doesn't have a name yet, is that the world is not just flat anymore. Mm-hmm. The world is now fast, fused, deep, and open. So let's go through all 4 of those. So when I say the world is fast now, what I mean is that there's been a change in the pace of change. So the speed of technological change now just gets faster and faster and faster as microchips improve and telecommunications improve. So the world is really getting fast. Second, the world isn't just flat now, Henry, it's fused. So we're not just interconnected, we're now interdependent. A ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal, and something that Tom is waiting for in Bethesda and that Henry's waiting for in Beijing are both affected. So we're not just connected, we're fused together, okay? We're also fused together by climate, okay? What America does with its air affects Canada. What China does with its air can affect, Thailand. What Australia does with its forest fires affects New Zealand. So we're fused by technology and by climate. Third, the world's gotten deep, deep. Deep is the most important word of this era. Because what we've done now, Henry, is we've put sensors everywhere. So, for many years, for millennia, Henry, the world has been speaking to us, but we just couldn't hear it. We couldn't hear it. So IBM did a study a few years ago. They took a lake in New York State and they put sensors from the surface all the way to the bottom and from one edge to the other. Suddenly, a lake that was just there, it was beautiful, we drove by it. Suddenly the lake started to speak, started to tell what was going on at the bottom, at the middle, at the next level, with fish, with fauna, with all kinds of things. Well, imagine now our knowledge of that is deep. It's very deep. And that's why this word deep, we had to coin a new adjective: deep state, deep mind, deep medicine, deep research, deep fake, to describe the fact that this is going deep inside of me. I can sit here in Bethesda right now in Washington, and I can look at publicly available satellite pictures of different parts of China, from Google Earth, from the European space satellite. I can look deep. I could probably find your office, Henry, and see if you're coming to work. I can do that as an individual. Little Tom Friedman can now go on to Google Earth and see Henry's office. But I can also see into Xinjiang, and China can see into Minneapolis, my hometown. So the world's getting deep. And lastly, it's getting radically open, radically open. So with this, Henry, every citizen is now a paparazzi, a filmmaker, a journalist, a publisher, with no editor, no filter. With this, a citizen in my hometown in Minneapolis took a picture of a policeman with the knee on the neck of a man named George Floyd. One person did that with this thing, with this device. And George Floyd became a name that went all over the world. People in China know the name George Floyd because an individual with this in an open world was able to tell that story. Same is true from China. We saw that in Hong Kong. We've seen it in other areas. So the world is getting fast, fused, deep, and open. And that is the central governing challenge today. How do you govern a world that's that fast, fused, deep, and open? That is our challenge.
Yes, great, Tom. I think that you are now thinking something deeper and open and fast, and that's probably the new trend you've been catching that for the next phase of globalization. I think it's no longer just flat, but we have many more layers on that now, which is a great. I think you pose a very profound question. Is that with the world fast changing, I mean the system that we've been built up have been based on the past centuries, or even based on the Bretton Woods system that built up after Second World War. Are we, enough to equip with the cope with this all those new challenges now? I mean, the world is really getting so fascinating and so changeable, and the system needs to how to react. And of course, we've seen this pandemic, which has a huge casualties on the world. Now we had First World War, we had the Second World War, and after Second World War, we have this new system, built up. Now we have this pandemic, which I think poses enormous challenge for us for how to respect nature. Are we going to have more buffers, as you said in our last time in our November conference? So we had I know that you studied the financial crisis on that. We studied SARS, and now we have this COVID. So what's next? I mean, if we do not respect climate, so I'm glad to see that President Biden now comes up. The first bill he signed, his order he signed, is to come back to the Paris Climate Change Accord, and you actually interviewed President Biden before he took office. So what do you think about these new buffers that actually we're trying to build, and or maybe are we losing that because of the global governance is falling behind now?
Well, when the world gets this fast, fused, deep, and open, Henry, there's only one way to govern it effectively, both at the national level, the local level, and the international level. And that's with what I call complex, adaptive coalitions. Complex, adaptive coalitions. So I take that term actually from nature. See, I think a fast, fused, deep, and open world is like a big climate change. The world's going through a big change in our climate, not just the climate of the climate, but the climate of everything, of technology, of globalization, et cetera. And in nature, when an ecosystem goes through a climate change, which ecosystems thrive, survive? Those that have complex, adaptive networks, okay, where all the parts of the system network together to maximize their resilience and their propulsion, their ability to go forward. Well, it's true of the world as well. When the world gets this fast, fused, deep, and open, the only way we can govern it effectively is with global, complex adaptive coalitions. Who can manage climate change? Unless America, China, and Europe in particular, and India and Japan and Korea, the big economies, are all working together. It's impossible. Who can manage global trade now, unless all the big economies are working together? So it's only complex adaptive coalitions that can effectively get the best out of this world and cushion us from the worst. The problem, Henry, is that right when that is the need, complex adaptive coalitions, governments are becoming more nationalistic. China's government's becoming more nationalistic. Under President Trump, America became more nationalistic. Russia, more nationalistic. Britain, Brexit, more nationalistic. So countries are becoming more nationalistic right when we need global coalitions more than ever. And even inside countries, political parties are becoming more tribal, right when they need to be more open and collaborative. So the world is fighting with this trend.
Yes, I think you're right. I think it looks like the global governance is really lags behind global practice or globalization pace.
The problem, Henry, is that there's a whole set of issues now that can only be managed effectively with global governance, cyber, financial flows, trade, climate, labor flows. They require global governance, but there's no global government. So what do we do when we need global governance, but there is no global government? Okay, we have this problem. And when US, China, the two biggest countries, then start fighting in the middle, the situation gets even worse, basically.
Exactly. I think that's really a challenge facing all of us. You're right. The global governance is lacking because there's no global government.
Yeah.
And the UN probably is not sufficient now because we see, the Second World War, we had this Bretton Woods system, you had United Nations, World Bank, and IMF, WTO, and China is one of the first signatories to the UN Charter and things like that. That carried us for 75 years, but it's not sufficient now, particularly with the globalization, as you just said, getting so fast paced. One of the reasons I'm thinking is that, I think China in this globalization, of course, since China, this year is also the Nixon, Kissinger visit China 50 years when China-US normalized the relation. But it was also China joined WTO for 20 years, whereas China's GDP has really gone up 10, 12 times. But then, China has been able to, prosper. China embraced globalization, and China lifted 800 million people out of poverty and things like that. But China also has a lot to be blamed by Western countries. One of the reasons I'm thinking, though, is that I read one of your, on the January 26th column on the New York Times, is that made in the US, socialism for the rich and capitalism for the rest. Basically, I saw you have mentioned a number there, which has also surprised to me, is the American rich is 10%, who owns more than 80% of the stock, have seen their wealth more than tripled in 30 years, while the bottom 50 wage earners had zero gains. So of course China has been able to export and do that, but also kept the inflation low in the US. But could there be some also, every country has its own problem too. China also has to tackle its own problem. But particularly the Trump era, I mean, he blamed everything on China for this widening gap. Whereas China actually managed to lift the 800 million people out of poverty is really to avoid extreme poverty. So maybe you're right. We need to have some global consensus or have some global new narratives on that. What do you think of those?
Yeah, look, U.S.-China relations. Let's talk about that a little bit because it's gotten very complicated. I'll just give you my view of that, and and it's related to your question because you mentioned the anniversary, and so the point I made this at the CDF, Henry, is that I think the 4 decades of U.S.-China relation, 1979 to 2019, that will go down as an epoch in U.S.-China relations. And unfortunately, that epoch is over. So what was that epoch about? That epoch was a period of what I called unconscious integration. Unconscious integration. Unconscious, not because we weren't thinking about it, but because it was so easy. So easy in the sense I, as an American company, could say, I want to have a supply chain in China. It starts in China. It could happen. I, as an American parent, could say, I want my son or daughter to go to university in China, study Mandarin. I, as an employer, could say, I want to hire the best Chinese technologist or student who's living in America, and I could. On the Chinese side, any Chinese could say over time, I want to have my company listed on the NASDAQ. I want to have an American partner. I want my kid to go to school in America. And over those 40 years, China and America became in some ways one country, two systems. It became the real one country, two systems. And we really got fused together. Now, that era, unfortunately, Henry, is over. Why is it over? Well, I'm going to come back to the word deep, because for most of those 40 years, say 30 of those 40 years, China sold us mostly shallow goods, shallow goods, goods we wore on our shoulders, shoes we wore on our feet, solar panels we put on our roof. I call those shallow goods. We sold China deep goods, computers, software, things that went inside the CCG, right in your office, American computers, software, right in Henry's office, right in his home, maybe in his phone.
Yeah.
We sold you deep things, you sold us shallow things for the most part, okay? And when China sold us only shallow things, politically speaking, we didn't care whether China was authoritarian, communist, libertarian, or vegetarian. It didn't matter because you were just selling us shallow goods. But when China, by its own development, its own technological development, over the last 10 years has been able to make deep goods. Huawei 5G, very deep good. And now they've come to America and said, we want to sell you our deep goods, just like you sold us your deep goods. We want to sell Tom Friedman Huawei that will go in his house and answer his telephone, okay? Yeah. And what we said was, whoa, wait a minute. When you were just selling us shallow goods, we didn't care about your political system. But if you want to sell me deep goods here in Bethesda, if you want Huawei to answer my phone, okay, then suddenly the difference in values matters. And that's where the absence of trust, the absence of shared trust between our two countries now really matters. China, central value, the stability of the collective, okay? So if the collective is advancing, if more people are coming out of poverty, that is a central Chinese value. And it values that more than Uyghur nationalism in Xinjiang, and it values that more than letting one or two people, Jack Ma, get super rich, okay? Its focus has always been on the collective and stability, because you're 1.4 billion people. In America, our value is the individual. We put much more primacy on the individual, the right of the individual to express themselves, the right of the individual to start a company, the right of the individual to thrive and do better or worse, okay? So and when it's the right of the individual, then it's the primacy of human rights and individual rights. So suddenly Americans in a deep world can look into Google Earth and see what look like labor camps in Xinjiang and say, wait a minute, I can see deep inside of you now, how you're treating your Muslim population. That bothers me. And China can say, wait a minute, I'm looking at what's going on in Minnesota, Minneapolis, how you have large numbers of poor people. Maybe that bothers me too, okay? And suddenly our difference in values, we can look inside Hong Kong. We can see from my office, I can see if China's not living up to its obligations to allow more democracy in Hong Kong. So now we're having a clash, Henry, on values in a way we didn't during that 40-year epoch. And it's going to be a problem, because our difference in values is really now making it very, very complicated. And because China is wealthier now and more powerful, it's also able to assert itself, its values, at home and abroad, more powerfully. And so we have a lot of work to do. The big question is, can we get back to a joint project, a shared project? Because the relative peace and prosperity of the world for those 40 years, 1979 to 2019, the relative peace and prosperity of the world, at the core of it was US-China relations, that US-Chinese one country, two systems. If we rip that apart now, the world will not be as prosperous and it will not be as peaceful. And when it's getting fast, fused, deep, and open, it won't be governed the way it needs to be. So we need to have some very deep conversations. China needs to understand, in a deep world, I can see inside Xinjiang. And if I think that there's forced labor there, I may boycott your cotton, okay? And Americans need to understand that a country of 1.4 billion people needs to maintain stability, okay? That's a high priority. And that it's going to come at this in a different way. We have to have an honest conversation with each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree, Tom, that we really need a deep dialogue on that. That's exactly the purpose of this as well. What I think you're right. We have to look at value, of course, but also should we have this have some new narrative, because I think what China has been doing for the last 40 years, opening up or China has transformed enormously beyond the recognition. And any foreigners who come to China who had 30, 40 years ago would recognize the changes. Particularly China now, this year actually, the government has announced they have lifted 800 million people out of poverty. They have finished the 13th five-year plan. Now they have finished the first centennial plan, which now become a prosperous, well-to-do society now. But they are launching to the next 14th five-year plan, and also by 2035, China is going to double its GDP. So they have been working one five-year plan after a five-year plan. So I remember, the former U.S. ambassador to China, Terry Branstad, he invited us, to his farewell cocktail, where he said, he really think that the success of China attribute to three factors. That one is that the Chinese are really hardworking, because anytime you come to China, it's it's not, if not 724, it's probably 996. There's a lot of people working very hard. And also, second is he think China attaches great importance to the family values. They have really respect seniors, collectivism. And thirdly is the education. China, they had one generation, several generations of one child, a whole family support that. So the success of China is not really, as American public understand, it's a purely a traditional old orthodox, system, which I think China has a system now, a combined technology democracy, combined market economy democracy, and with meritocracy. So with 5,000 years history, culture, and it has its own reason. And particularly China has delivered well on the performance. I think, as Deng Xiaoping said, if it doesn't matter white cat, black cat, as long as it catches mice. So if China can lift 800 million people out of poverty, and also keep the least casualties of COVID-19, that's probably the biggest human rights achievement that people, can achieve in a Chinese situation. And also, as you said, China has 1.4 billion people. The stability is almost always important. So if China can build 2/3 of the world fast train, if the China keep 7 out of the 10 largest container ports in the world, if China can become the largest trading nation with 130 countries, after all, China can contribute over 1/3 of the global GDP growth. Some KPI China is doing well, but that value, maybe we should have a little bit more tolerance to a different system. Like President Biden said, okay, he comes out and he said, we like to have a competition, even fierce competition, but we also can cooperate as well. So Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said at the NPC section, first time that, okay, we can have a peaceful competition too, and let's have a cooperation. So should we be a bit more, treating each other as equal and not really evil, as a Soviet Union Cold War kind of a mentality? So I think there's a lot of catch up to do. So that's probably China. A lot of people in China think like that.
So it's a very good point. People ask me, they say, "Oh, you're going on a webinar in China. They must be censoring you." I said, "No. I'll bring up Xinjiang. I'll bring up Hong Kong. Nobody's going to censor me." We're having actually, Henry, a very valuable dialogue. You're giving me China's perspective. I'm giving you the concerns of America. We're actually having a respectful dialogue. So important. But what worries me most right now is there's like 3 American journalists left in China. I mean, China's basically thrown out almost all the Western journalists. America has asked some Chinese journalists to leave too, not as many as China has. And so we're not having this very respectful dialogue. You've got your perspective. It's not illegitimate from my point of view. The points you raise about bringing people out of poverty and providing stability, that's also affects the human condition. Very important, your perspective. You listen respectfully to my perspective when I raise questions about, how a whole culture is treated in Xinjiang or democracy in Hong Kong. And then maybe you'll come back and say, well, Tom's got a point. And I come back and say, Henry's got a point. And we have a respectful dialogue. And then maybe I can say to you, Henry, if China did this on Hong Kong, or in Xinjiang, it would really help. And you could say, Tom, if America did this on, how you talk about China, or how you treat China on the world stage, it would really help. And maybe then we start to take confidence building measures where each of us does something to lower the temperature. Unfortunately, what happened in Alaska was sort of mutual debate, name calling, whatever, and it leaves everybody just feeling kind of raw and angry. So one, I just say I appreciate the respectful dialogue that you're hosting. I wish we could all, we could broaden this, and because there are legitimate concerns America and the West has, and what I'm afraid of is those legitimate concerns we have aren't even listened to, okay? then it's going to end up in what I fear, and I don't hope for this, but what I fear, it will end up in something like a boycott of the 2022 Olympics. And then the whole relationship will blow up, okay? And that's why I think it's so important we have a dialogue where China says, I hear you, I will take this gesture. And America says, I hear you, I will take this gesture. And we find ways to go together, because Henry, in a fused world, my friend Graham Allison always says this, we now have mutual assured destruction.
Yes.
Mutual assured destruction. The two of us, we can destroy each other. We can destroy the global economy. We can destroy the global climate. And so we are doomed to work together. And what bothers me right now is that we're not having the kind of frank but respectful dialogue that we need, and then walking away from that dialogue with a to-do list. Okay, I've heard what Tom says, about the situation of the Uyghurs or Hong Kong. I don't agree with all of it, but I'm going to try to work on something. And I come away and say, I hear what Henry's saying. This country brought 800 million people out of poverty. Do you know how much more stable the world is because China did that? Okay, that's also a huge thing. And that I'm going to work on things that are of your concern. We need to get back to that dialogue, because I go back to my central point, Henry, the 40 years, 1979 to 2019, they will be seen as a golden era of global prosperity and peace, okay? Because of relative prosperity and relative peace. And at the core of it was US-China. If you rip out that core now, your diplomats, they may have a good day putting me down or putting America down. My diplomats, they may have one good day putting China down, okay? But the world will have a bad year after year after year if we don't find a way for US-China to work together.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the largest two economy in the world, we're going, we have a moral responsibility, I think, moral duties now to really, work together, absolutely. So you're right. I think, of course, I agree with you, that the journalism should really be resumed. Yeah. Even the consulate should be resumed. We should intensify the exchanges. I mean, I love the days, we have more exchanges. Of course, I think even on that, China has 400,000 students in the US. US only have 10,000 in China. I hope that we can increase more to attract US students come to China. But you're right. I think there's more, maybe more, on the social level, on the civil society level, we can have more exchanges. Even, you talk about the issue of Xinjiang and Hong Kong, of course, and because the feeling here is that we often hear the international, people say, oh, here you have 1 million locked up, 2 million locked up, 3 million locked up, but we really don't know where that is coming from. I mean, where is the origin, citation or statistic, calculation comes from? Or they say we have the satellite to calculate so many buildings. But, the buildings that a lot of them are empty, but it's not really housing a lot of people. And another thing is that, there's only 10, 12 million Uyghurs in Xinjiang. If you said 1 million, 2 million, 3 million locked up, it's really hard to really prove on that. And actually, the government has actually said, the white paper last year, all the trainees in the education school has been graduated already. And the Xinjiang government said again this year. So Chinese foreign spokesperson welcome foreign ambassadors and journalists to come. I think the best way is to read, as you said, we have more dialogue, have more exchanges, and then really, rather than we have cause-specific, just talking about each other rather than talking to each other. And the same thing is Hong Kong. Now Hong Kong is no longer in chaotic situation. The stock market is bad, the security is bad, multinational all come back, and so the legislature is safe now, and the same is Capitol Hill. I mean, we should probably have the same criteria for people storm the Capitol Hill or let's go in Hong Kong. So, but you are absolutely right. I think we really need a lot of dialogue on that, and particularly we need to welcome all the journalists on both sides to really promote this dialogue. So I'm really
just one thing. I think it'd be very important from my point of view. If a team of New York Times reporters, whatever, were allowed into Xinjiang, let them go, let them write, let them see, and then we can draw independent conclusion. I think that's very, very important. And from the Chinese side, anywhere you want to come in America, I think you should be allowed to go. So
sure, yeah, that's right. I think that could be a good idea. It can be open, and I think that's probably. Open is really the great way to solve all those questions, and but I appreciate you also mentioned about at CDF. I was there when you talk at the conference there about decoupling. I think it's very hard to decouple, and but also you mentioned Huawei. I mean, you were even talking that maybe we should really let a little bit of experiment going on, or let them go to small states to try it out. I mean, build up the trust, as you said. So it's a trust building between us. I think we should really starting from given the new Biden administration to do that.
I feel very strongly about that because if we go to a tech Cold War, that will be not only bad for the world. I believe it'll be bad for America. If there is a Chinese tech ecosystem and an American tech ecosystem, I'm not sure the majority of the world will come to the American tech ecosystem, either for financial reasons or technological reasons. I'm not sure. I don't think that's a healthy thing. Look, I think the best thing in the world is mutual interdependence. I want China dependent on Intel chips. I'm totally comfortable if America is dependent on Chinese supply chains. I mean, I think the more interdependent we become, the more the politics will follow. I also believe, as I've said this before, so I'll say, I've been going to China now, since 1989, and China's so much more open than it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I would say it's more closed than it was 5, 6 years ago. But I also believe the trend line, as China develops, as it builds a bigger and bigger middle class, where people don't just come out of poverty, but enter the middle class. You alluded to it, Henry. How many Chinese tourists now are coming to the world?
Yes.
Tens of millions every year. So people say to me sometimes, you say, Friedman, you said China would become more open, but in the last 5, 6 years, it's become more closed. I say, well, who declared the year 2021 the end of history? Countries move at different pace, 3 steps forward, half step back, 3 steps forward, half step back. I am confident that as China develops, grows, develops a middle, not just out of poverty, but a middle class that wants to travel, wants to have its students go everywhere in the world, that the trend line toward openness will continue. So we should have a little confidence in that too. And I think the more we're integrated, the more that will happen. But we do have this core trust problem. And one of the things I often ask myself, Henry, is what are we fighting about?
Yeah.
It's surely not ideology, because China is more capitalist than we are in a lot of ways, okay? Does China want to take over Chinatown in San Francisco? I don't think so. Does America want to occupy Shanghai or Nanjing? I don't think so. So I'm not even sure what we're fighting about. I mean, in the sense, in the deepest sense, yes, there's a clash of values. I get that. But it's not like not like Russia, we will bury you. Well, so obviously it's two great powers. Yeah. And anytime there are two great powers, it's who's going to have influence where. I get that. But this all should be manageable. But what it does require, Henry, it requires each of us to do something hard. Mm-hmm. That's what's very important.
Yeah.
It would take hard confidence building measures by China on Xinjiang or on Hong Kong, I think, to have an impact in the West. it will take hard confidence building measures in the West on something like Huawei, where America says, okay, we're going to give you a test. You can install Huawei 5G in Texas, okay? And we'll see how you do. And if you do better, then you can go to Oklahoma. Or if you do well, if you behave in accordance to our laws. We each, Henry, to get each other's attention now, we each have to do something hard. Not easy, but something hard. When China does something hard on Hong Kong or Xinjiang, that will really get Americans' attention. And when we do something hard on something like Huawei, that will get China's attention. And that's something we can then build on. Right now, neither side wants to really do anything hard, because for us to let Huawei in now, that would politically be hard. Yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah. For China to take the kind of steps we've been talking about on Xinjiang or Hong Kong, that will be hard. But I think if we each do something hard now, that would have a huge confidence building. That would be the thing that would really change the direction of the relationship right now.
Yeah, I think Tom, you talk this trust building and the confidence building. I think is absolutely important, and also you really hit the right point. That what are we fighting for? What are the points to fight? I mean, the two countries are so intertwined. I mean, yeah. Look at the U.S. Actually, I think the U.S.-China Business Council issued a report not too long ago. The trade war actually could cost 0.5 of GDP of U.S. and lose 200,000, 300,000 jobs just for the trade war. And actually now you have GM, Ford sells more cars in China probably than the United States now. I mean, all the European automobiles sells more cars in China than their own country. Tesla almost become the largest company in the world because that's the only company they full production in China during the COVID last year. Yeah. And so I think the Walmart purchased so many goods from China, so lower the inflation of the U.S. economy, and it's so much intertwined. And I really think that Apple also is the second largest global market for Apple after U.S. So there's really no.
Henry, China is the second largest book market for me.
You're right, absolutely.
I sold more copies of The World is Flat in China than any other country other than America. So I know the benefits of our integration. I know there are still trade issues. There are questions of fairness that are very serious that we need to address. But we need to get away from the Alaska kind of meeting of very public name calling, and get down to some really not hard talk, but some really hard doing, where China does things that are really hard on trade, and we do things that are really hard. That's what will actually change, I think, the dynamic in the relationship.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that so I'm kind of to see President Biden comes up. He didn't talk about rivalry. He talked about fierce competition at the Munich Security Conference Summit there, and also he said has been dialogue, has been with President Xi for so many days together, and so much understanding of each other. So there's no confrontation. They don't seek confrontations. China has emphasized again, there's no confrontation, no conflict, that they won't really have a peaceful coexistence.
Well, on that point, Henry, you raise, it's very important that we not waste the fact that President Xi and President Biden have a personal relationship. That's very unusual. I was actually at a State Department lunch and got to sit at a table when both of them were vice presidents, and got to see that personal relationship. We must not waste that.
Absolutely, I think President Biden is having this on Earth Day next month for the climate change. He invited many leaders to come. So we hope that President Xi may be attending as well, and so that the two leaders have a chance to dialogue again. And I think we need some momentum to really start a good dialogue. I noticed that Ford Foundation and quite a few U.S. foundations started the U.S.-China Scholar Exchange Program. We hope that the Fulbright Scholar Program can be resumed, and the Consulate of Houston, Chengdu can be resumed, and then we have the student exchange can be resumed. I think there's some new things that at least now that the new Biden administration is not calling CPC anymore on a daily basis. They are more pragmatic, and also they not arrest Chinese student on a daily basis, charge everyone as espionage or spy. So they are more pragmatic, and then we hope that we can really, as you said, both sides can do a lot of things. But I think, if as the value, absolutely. So if we have a common value that for the prosperity of the world, if we really abandon some old style of code mentality thinking, and then look at the fact, look at the effectiveness and efficiency. One of the things I noticed that there's probably two consensus on China in the U.S., two consensus now in the Congress. One is on China, bipartisan on China. Another one is on the infrastructure. The U.S. needs to renovate the infrastructure. So China has done that the best in the world now. I mean, has the longest fast train, longest network, longest metro, bridges. 80% of tourist bridges are built in China, and also largest. So maybe U.S. and China can collaborate. You talk about taxes. We studied that. The inland infrastructure from Texas to export energy to China is double the cost from coast to China because there's no infrastructure in the Texas. So it's good that China and US can work on infrastructure, or maybe we can elevate Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIB, to the World Infrastructure Investment Bank, invite US and Japan to join us, because there's only two countries that are still not there. All the rest of the UK and France, EU countries are there. So there's many things we can collaborate. And for the next 75 years of after this worldwide virus war, we can have a new addition to the global governance, to the global new mechanism that can secure the peace and security, rather than, as you said, where there's no governance and everybody's fighting, and then we are really at the brink of the war. And Graham Allison is right. We're really facing a huge, mutually assured destruction that if we're not very careful on that. So what do you think we can prevent more further going down, and how can we improve the relation? I think that opinion leader like you is really, great. I mean, you wrote an op-ed, just recently in the New York Times, and has actually caused a lot of attention. That a lot of comments there that called China doesn't respect U.S. anymore for good reason. But probably, in some Chinese think like that. But it's true. If you're talking about performance, at least, if the shoe doesn't fit China well, how can China achieve all those achievements? Of course, embrace globalization is one of the factors, but also 5,000 history, its own logistic culture. It's also a collective society, people willing to sacrifice because of the COVID for the individual freedom, whereas individual. So maybe there's a little bit of cultural differences rather than ideological differences that we probably need to be more careful when we see the values too different.
Yeah, look, for me, 90% of US-China policy is about making America stronger. That is, if we invest in our infrastructure, if we invest in our education, if we invest in our government-funded research, if we take advantage of immigration, it's one of the great advantages we've always had over every other country, not just China, that we can attract the world's best brains to our shore, including Chinese. I'd like all your students to stay here, okay?
Yes.
That would be my plan, okay? So no. We need to get our own act together, Henry. And again, I believe we have legitimate issues, moral, diplomatic, ethical issues that have informed all the tensions over Hong Kong, Xinjiang, spying, all of that. We must always raise those. We're going to raise those from our side. But also, we have got to get our act together at home. That's what I was saying in that article. China has a formula for success. We had a formula for success. We've gotten away from our formula for success. And if we are the most dynamic, attractive, compelling economy and society in the world, to me, that's the best Russia policy, the best China policy, because people will look at us and they'll say, we want more of that, okay? And so I'm focused 90%. I get criticized a lot because when I point out how well China is doing on education or infrastructure, science, whatever, people say, oh, Friedman, you love China. Mm. Well, you know, I don't hate China. It's just, I'm actually not thinking about China. I'm thinking about America. And I'm trying to use China's success, very frankly, Henry, I'm trying to use China's success on infrastructure, on education, on science, on anti-poverty as a way to stimulate and challenge Americans. Because we did that with Russia during the Cold War. Why did we build a highway system? Because we thought we needed it for the Cold War. Why did we race to the moon? Because we thought we needed it, you know, vis-a-vis the Russians. And when we lost that outside challenger, frankly, we got a little lazy at home. We got a little, you know, we were ready to settle, to be, as I said in that column, dumb as we want to be. So, you know, I am not at all ashamed of taking China's successes and saying to Americans, you know, they're going to be the leading and most powerful country in the world if we don't get back to our formula for success. So that is my very unapologetic strategy of pointing out where China is succeeding. And I don't want China to fail. I think the world will be better if China succeeds and we succeed. And I think we will have more influence in China if we succeed, if we have the infrastructure, if we have the science. Then Chinese people will say, wait a minute, America, that's what happened 40 years ago. They sent their kids to America, they saw how it was doing, and they said, we want that here. And so their kids came home from studying in America and they started to imitate us. So, you know, people being the best example is the most powerful human rights policy, the most powerful economic policy, the most powerful diplomatic policy. Make America the best at everything. And believe me, the world will respond.
Yeah, I think you're very you know, stimulating, and of course always compare the two countries' advantage, disadvantage. But of course, you mentioned one of the core competence of the U.S. I think it's the talent attraction from over the board. You know, I mean, Biden administration probably going to do more of that. So they probably be more welcome foreign student. I mean, like the late.
I want all your students. I give them all a green card. You just tell them.
Yes. But I know that that's where Graham Bennington told me when he interviewed former Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew said, you know, U.S. is picking brain talent from 7 billion people, while China picking from 1.3. So we probably have to learn from U.S. as well. I mean, to attract more U.S. students come to China. You're absolutely right. I mean, that really increased the understanding and mutual trust, because I think there's more public Chinese knows more about U.S. We felt a bit less U.S. people knowing about China. Of course, you are the exception. You are so knowledgeable on China. So that's really, we hope that we can have more dialogue like this. And so I think that, you know, finally, probably we could say is that, you know, if Chinese system seems working, you know, why fix it? You know, I mean, of course, we still need to improvement, absolutely. But you're absolutely right. You know, the U.S. and China, and as two largest you know, countries in the world, has to work together. But let's have a peaceful competition rather than confrontation or rivalry, right? So I think, you know, how we can get into that. You know, we admit our differences, but let's, you know, build up a more transparent rules, and let's compete. Let's reform WTO. China actually, you know, CCG is promoting China to join TPP, and Premier Li Keqiang and President Xi has all said, we are willing to join TPP. We are positively consider that. TPP was designed by the U.S. with higher standards of trade and practices. Yeah, let's talk about that. So rather than we're fighting with trade war and tariff, maybe we could, you know, using those multilateral forms, We have the RCEP, we have CAI with your EU investment treaty, lots of CBDB, but also maybe we should start this BIT, bilateral investment treaty with US, where they almost signed during the Obama administration. So many things can work on, and I really appreciate your sharing so many valuable ideas. Of course, you are the glue of the globalization. We are a think tank of globalization. We love to strengthen this dialogue.
Well, Henry, again, I've visited your center so many times, and I've always appreciated the forum you give me to be very frank. Whenever I've spoken my mind when I'm at your center, when I'm here, and I benefit from you speaking your mind, very honestly, defending your system where you believe it needs defending. I do the same. And as I say, the thing that really is needed most now, and I really want to go back because this is really my message. You only get one chance, Henry, to make a second impression. Not a first impression, but you only get one chance to make a second impression. Yeah. And China and America, they really need to make a second impression on each other right now. Okay. Mm-hmm. We both need to give each other a new look, a second look. And I think that will only happen though, if we each do something a little hard, that people say, wow, that was hard for China to do. Wow, that was hard for America to do. Okay. But I think if we can both we need to get each other's attention again. And it's very important. And I would say this to your diplomats, some of whom I know, I give this as friendly advice. You don't want to be seen as a bully. Okay. China does not want to be seen as a bully to Australia or to other countries. Nobody likes a bully. And you know how I know that, Henry? Because nobody liked America when it was a bully, okay? After the Cold War, we thought we were the hyperpower, okay? And we could go anywhere and tell everyone to do anything. And when that happened, the world coalesced against us, okay? Because they thought we were kind of a big bully. And I think China's diplomats need to keep that in mind. Nobody likes a bully, okay? What people really respond to is when they see you do something hard. We need to do that. China needs to do that. And then we can both have a second impression.
Yeah, great. And thank you, Tom. I think that we have a very stimulating and also very meaningful dialogue. I really think that you have been the opinion leader in the US and internationally. We need more this kind of frank dialogue. And you're right. I mean, China, hasn't really sent any soldiers anywhere, but of course, there's a way to be improved. I mean, also has a better way to tell that stories. Absolutely. Exactly. So I think US has also realized that. I'm also glad to see that Secretary Blinken said that the U.S. now is no longer aimed at topple any government now. They are trying to be more, peaceful coexistence. So China and U.S. learning each other. I mean, they will probably maintain global stability.
Well, I think what happened in Alaska, Henry, probably was a necessary throat clearing for both sides. Okay, yes. Both sides kind of need to clear their throat. And now I really hope, as Joe Biden is a good man. He's a stable president. He's not like Trump. He's a partner for serious dialogue, and I'm still hopeful that now that both sides have kind of gotten everything off their chest, that they can sit down and have the kind of dialogue that you and I are having, honest, frank, and respectful, but also where we actually agree to do something, some hard things, and that can actually bring the relationship where it needs to be.
I heard that when they closed the door, it seems very friendly.
Yes, I heard that too, yes.
And also, I saw Mr. Foreign had the issue statement on the website, which lined up a lot of good stuff. But you're right. I mean, we need to clear our chest and and then we can really calm down and talk about good stuff. And so it's great that we have almost 800,000 viewers online, actually, and through several channels. We have quite a few media, actually, questions from China's local media. So we have first we have China Radio International, and so maybe we'll take a bit of your extra time. And so they said last year you wrote an open letter to the then U.S. President Donald Trump, stressed the need for more planned response to fight against the pandemic, and offer several suggestions of your own. So if you're having an interview with Biden, or you are talking to President Biden again, what do you think about the new proposal we can have for the world and also for U.S. to contain this pandemic?
Well, it's a very, very good and important question. I feel good about where America is right now, Henry. I feel like with 2 million people being vaccinated a day now, basically, that by June, July, we will be over the worst of this. Mm-hmm. But we do need, going forward, to have an understanding, a global understanding of how to prevent the next pandemic. This pandemic, SARS-CoV-1 and SARS-CoV-2, they both emerge in the interface between urbanization and wilderness areas. Basically, these are viruses jumping from animals in the wild through markets into urban areas. And as we expand into urban areas through our development, as China expands into wilderness areas through its development, as we expand, as Brazil deforests, we have to have a global discussion, Henry, about the interface between urbanization, deforestation, wilderness, and wild animals. And so we are not transporting viruses that really evolved in the wilderness, okay, through deforestation and urbanization into human settlement areas, and then in the globalization system going everywhere. So I know China is concerned about this. It's actually taken steps to ban wet markets and the sale of certain wild animals. And I think it's very important we sit down together, try to understand where the coronavirus emerged, where Ebola emerged, and in this interface between wilderness, wild animals, and urbanization, and that we make sure globally, we have a global regime that can really stop this kind of transmission and the sale globally of wild animals that really carry these viruses. So there's a very important global discussion that needs to happen there. It has to involve China, America, African nations, Europe, et cetera. But it's very important that China and America catalyze that discussion.
Yeah. Thank you. I think you're right. I think, I'm glad that President Biden is coming back to WHO, and
very important.
Yeah, after President Xi pledged $2 billion in supporting the COVID-19 fighting, President Biden pledged $2 billion also at the G7 summit. So we see the two leaders really, concerning this global situation, and then we should really strengthen the global dialogue on that. I have another question from China Daily, and so he was basically saying, what do you think of the role that China can play on climate change? Of course, President Biden is having his Earth Summit, and also, what about we having a global, major countries group of discussing this, just like we had the, G20 fighting financial crisis. We really got to act together and stabilize the world economy. So now the U.S. is now really the one of the leaders on this, actually probably the most important country. And China is one, and the U.S. are two largest emitters of the carbon. And probably we should have a closer collaboration mechanism rather than just also the climate change Paris Accord, because President Xi has already pledged very concrete objectives. And we have a sandstorm in Beijing again. We really feel the pressure of that. we can do more on climate
Henry,
change.
the most important thing that the government of China can do, and the most important thing the government of America can do, and the most important thing the government of Germany can do, okay, is with every clean technology, let's use solar panels, for instance, just take one. The greatest contribution the government of China can do is to mandate, I'm making this up, but you'll get the point, mandate that every building in China has to have some solar power, okay? Because the minute China does that, the price of solar panels will go down. You will drive the price of manufacturing solar panels down so a villager in Africa can have them, okay? So same in America, like let's say wind power. Offshore wind in the ocean, is much more expensive than onshore wind, okay? Our job in America, the US government, is to subsidize offshore wind, okay? So we bring the price down so everyone in the world can use it. And then we bring our standards up. So the role of government is bring the price down, but then gradually bring the standards up. So if China can cut in half, the Chinese government, by mandating that everyone has to have solar panels, you cut the price in half, and then you say every year, every house has to add one solar panel, okay? Then you bring the price down and you bring the standards up. That's how we get scale. So I'm not against Paris Agreement, US-China dialogue, but I'm actually very focused, Henry, on the public-private partnership that creates scale. And governments, your government, my government, the German government, their job, excuse me, is to drive the price down so every villager in China can afford solar or wind. And then every year raise the standard so every year they're required to add a little more. That's how we change the climate.
That's a great idea. Great idea. Actually, you talk about that. I think the public-private partnership is really important because China is actually developing very fast on that. You know, since the government
China's been a leader in that.
You know, the largest solar producers now in the world, the largest windmill producer in the world, and also clean car. You know, clean energy car now, the largest producer in the world now. So, you know, this kind of a you know, momentum. If the U.S.
it's really good. But China's also the largest coal, you know, user in the world.
That's right.
And it wants to get off coal. But the way to do that is, again, by just using the government's balance sheet to really make these clean technologies more and more efficient and available, and then raising standards. If China's government does that, that will be a gift to the whole world, Henry. It'd be a gift to the whole world.
Yeah, I think China is really working towards that objective, and also China now has become the one of the biggest market now. You know, with 400 million middle class and 800 million people out of poverty. So I'm sure
people want clean air in their cities. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. Also, the buildings for energy saving. It's enormous technology innovation there. That's why President Biden said there's trillions of new opportunities ahead. So if both China and US work together on that, we probably can provide the infrastructure of the climate change for the world with EU and many other countries. You know, that's really great.
That would be a great gift to the world.
Yeah. We have another question from Guancha, media from Shanghai, actually. He was asking that the most recent shuttle diplomacy for Foreign Minister Wang Yi to the Middle East has been under spotlight. Apart from the, he meets Saudi Arabia, Iran, and also invited the Palestinian and Israel to hold a direct dialogue with China. So he said, Mr. Friedman, you had long followed the Israel-Palestinian peace process. How do you see the current situation in the Middle East and the role played by China and the US probably?
It's a very good question.
You're the expert on that. You have Oxford degree on the Middle East, yeah.
So there would not have been a nuclear agreement with Iran without China's help. China played a very important role, China and Russia and the European Union, in helping us get a nuclear agreement. President Trump unwisely in my view, tore up that agreement. But he tore it up in part because Iran was being a bad actor in the region, I would argue, a source of instability. Not for Israel, but for Lebanon, for Iraq, for Syria. And I hope that as China gets more involved in the region, that it will do so with an eye to regional stability, not just counterbalancing America, okay? So when China signs a deal with Iran to buy Iranian oil, is it using its leverage to get Iran back into the nuclear deal? Or is it using its leverage to counterbalance America? This is very, very important because China has an interest in stability in the region. Iran becoming a nuclear power is not good for China. China has never wanted to see nuclear proliferation. That's why it supported the Iran nuclear deal. And so I hope that if China is getting more involved in the Middle East, it will be on the side of making the region more stable, not by making it easy for Iran not to be in the nuclear deal, but by getting Iran back into the nuclear deal. Again, in fairness to China, it was America, it was Trump that tore up the nuclear deal, not China. But I think China can be a very important source of leverage for helping us get back to the nuclear deal. And I hope it uses its power and energy in that direction.
Great. Yeah, right, absolutely right. I think no country wants proliferation, particularly China and the U.S.
Yeah.
And so China and U.S. should work together on probably for the Middle East, and then play a bit more active role, and including probably issues like North Korea, and for Korean Peninsula, peace development as well. Absolutely important. Probably I have a last question for you, from back to the globalization where we started. It's a question from China News Agency, basically saying, consider the impact of a pandemic, people of different countries being isolated from each other, and many company organizations are stuck in the in this kind of a stagnance now. And do you think it will really slow down the globalization, or you think globalization will have a new start after post-COVID? So let's come back to the globalization. Yes.
Very good question. Good place to end. Henry, I think we are on the verge of an incredible explosion of globalization, because what the pandemic has done, before the pandemic, McKinsey estimated about 20% of American companies had digitized, their business, had digitized their business. After the pandemic, so many more companies have digitized their business. Look what CCG has done. You've digitized your forums, okay? Now, you and I are acting globally as individuals.
Yes.
More easily, more cheaply, thanks to a Chinese company, Zoom, more efficiently than ever. It's not as good, Henry, as when I'm in your auditorium.
Yeah.
About 90% is good.
That's right.
And when I'm in your auditorium, we just have the people in the auditorium. Now we have 800,000 people around China. So you see that the fact that the pandemic has forced us to digitize so many things is also going to allow us to globalize in so many more ways. Telemedicine, teleeducation, telebusiness. And what will come out of this is a new hybrid. So next time you and I meet, maybe it'll be on Zoom, or maybe it'll be in in your office in Beijing, or maybe it'll be in your office in Beijing with Zoom.
Yes.
Okay. So I think when this is over, we will have so many more ways to globalize, but the world is going to continue going from size large to size small, to size medium to size small. Okay. Thanks to the pandemic, it's going to happen faster than ever.
Yeah, probably the pandemic actually brings people closer in terms of technology, and it make people think how valuable when we can normally interact with each other. And
Henry, I have done more webinars
yeah,
that have reached more people in China this year of the pandemic than in the previous 30 years. Okay.
yes, yes. So we see some positive side of that. I'm glad to see at the Alaska meeting, both U.S. and Chinese government officials talking about probably visas or relax and also open the traffic. So we hope that we can invite you to give a talk again at the CCG. And so for tonight, and we have almost 900,000. We'll keep increasing the viewers. And I think that the dialogue we had is really very frank, but very constructive and also meaningful, stimulating. And so that we can really provide this kind of a better narrative, a more constructive dialogue, and also seek the common grounds and minimize the differences. And I'm sure China and the US being the two largest economy, we have the more responsibility to work together, for climate change or pandemic or the developed countries' debt issues and so many things. So it's absolutely correct. And you're
well, Henry, I have great respect for the fact that you invite me. You let me say whatever I want. I say whatever I want. I say I know hard things for some, Chinese officials to hear, but I think it's said out of respect and a desire to see the relationship get on a healthier track. And I appreciate your giving me this opportunity to reach your audience and to reach so many friends and readers in China. And I look forward to doing it again, but I really, I respect and appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Tom, for your time to spend with us. Thank you very much. We hope to see you again. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I also thank our viewers tonight. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.